On December 1st, 1955, a seamstress named Rosa Parks was arrested for refusing to give up her bus seat to a white man. It seemed like an isolated incident. But what was invisible to local whites was the sophisticated network of black activists ready to challenge laws that kept the races separate in restaurants, theaters, and buses. For years, Parks and the others had been preparing for this moment. To protest the arrest, local black leaders called for a bus boycott. The response was overwhelming. Black passengers, the economic backbone of the bus system, happily walked miles rather than ride the segregated buses. The first night of the boycott, a protest meeting was scheduled. As dusk arrived, the church was filled, and more than 6,000 people surrounded it to listen over loudspeakers. The keynote speaker was a new minister in town. Just 26 years old, with only 15 minutes to prepare his speech, he was nervous about stepping forward. His name was Martin Luther King.
The only weapon that we have in our hands this evening is the weapon of protest. That's all. We are not wrong in what we are doing. If we are wrong, the Supreme Court of this nation is wrong. If we are wrong, the Constitution of the United States is wrong. If we are wrong, God Almighty is wrong.
The Montgomery bus boycott had found its spokesman. No one knew it yet, but in Martin Luther King, the growing civil rights movement had also found a charismatic leader who could preach the sermon of equality to the nation.
We, the Negro citizens, have decided not to ride the buses in Montgomery until we receive some justice and until we get a hearing, even if it takes a year.
Angry whites bombed King's home, but it was King who was arrested for conspiracy to boycott. Yet the arrest played into King's hands. He understood that he could shame the nation by showing the injustice of its laws.
From that, I think, came the essential ingredients that Martin King used so well, which was a televised morality play. The more they either arrested them or treated them harshly, the more the media liked it, the better story it was, and the more it worked into the hands of the black protesters as the rest of the nation sat and watched this morality play.
We feel that we are right and that we have a legitimate complaint. And also we feel that one of the great glories of America is the right to protest for right.
I remember sitting in my living room and I saw this man that looked so impressive coming out of a courthouse or church. And he was announced as Dr. Martin Luther King. And I thought, there's not but one place in the world for me to be. That's Montgomery. I got on a plane and went to Montgomery.
Tim Black played an active role in the Montgomery boycott, a powerful marriage of grassroots organizing and articulate leaders who knew how to frame the drama in terms all Americans, particularly the media, could understand. 1 year after they began the struggle, the boycotters won the fight when the Supreme Court declared segregated busing to be unconstitutional.
The decision rendered by the Supreme Court yesterday was a victory. But it wasn't a victory for colored folks. Don't make that victory that small. It wasn't a victory for 50,000 Negroes of Montgomery. It wasn't merely a victory for 16 million Negroes of America. That was a victory for justice.
The Till trial had been Act 1. Montgomery was Act 2. Now the stage was set for Act 3. A TV drama that would shame America in the eyes of the world. A drama in which children would play the leading role. In 1954, the Supreme Court decision of Brown versus Board of Education had declared that segregated schools were unconstitutional. To provide equal opportunity for all children, schools across the country would be forced to integrate. In 1957, Little Rock, Arkansas, in order to comply with the Supreme Court, moved to integrate its Central High School. Starting slowly, the local school board chose 9 African American students for their excellent grades. One of these, Ernest Green, remembers the reaction of a white co-worker.
I came to work, and this guy came screaming at me. He said, "How could you do that?" And I had a perplexed look on my face. I said, "Do what? What are you talking about?" He said, "You seem like such a nice guy, and now you go and screw up our relationship." And that fellow was like probably any number of other whites in the South, baffled by why anybody black would want to change the social order. I thought it was my right.
The minute they walk in, that's when we walk out. And it's not right. They have schools just as good as ours. It will be
This popular resentment did not escape the notice of Orville Faubus, the governor of Arkansas. Seeking re-election, he would find a dramatic way of courting the segregationist vote.
Units of the National Guard have been and are now being mobilized with the mission to maintain or restore the peace and good order of this community.
Faubus used the force of the Arkansas National Guard to prevent any black students from entering Central High School. Afraid of potential violence, the NAACP called back the black children who were supposed to attend school that day. But one girl, Elizabeth Eckford, didn't have a phone. She went to school alone. A white woman intervened and managed to escort Elizabeth Eckford to a nearby bus. But TV viewers around the country had been horrified by what had happened to the young girl. President Eisenhower tried to reach a compromise with Faubus. But when Faubus called off the National Guard, he left the explosive situation in the hands of a few local police. When the students managed to sneak into school through a back entrance, the white crowd turned on a black reporter outside the school. In the Cold War with the Soviet Union, the United States promoted the justice of the American way. Now, to a watching world, American ideals seemed little more than a sham. That night, President Eisenhower addressed the nation.
Our enemies are gloating over this incident and using it everywhere to misrepresent our whole nation. We are portrayed as a violator of those standards of conduct which the peoples of the world united to proclaim in the Charter of the United Nations. Mob rule can not be allowed to override the decisions of our courts.
Eisenhower ordered the invasion of Arkansas by units of the 101st Airborne Division. The Army had instructions to maintain order and to secure the safety of the black students while they attended school. To Orville Faubus, it was a replay of the Civil War.
We are now an occupied territory. In the name of liberty we hold so dear, in the name of decency which we all cherish, what is happening in America?
Eisenhower calling out the federal troops was the beginning of a real aid and assist to the modern civil rights movement, because it put the federal government fairly behind the desires and efforts of black citizens. The first time anybody could think of that. Somebody cared about us, somebody cared about protecting our rights, somebody cared about black citizens.
Every day, the soldiers escorted the children to school in a convoy of jeeps mounted with machine guns.
You know, this is a group of 9 teenagers, and we get out of this station wagon. They have cleared the street. We're surrounded by a cordon of soldiers with bayonets drawn, marching up to the front of the steps. You had, you know, it was an overwhelming moment.
They are in the school now. The students whom you still see on the steps up there. There were
television
about 200
had
of them
reached its mobile stage. It could take you where you could not be, which is the most important thing about television, and show you things you could not see.
Everyone would get up in the morning, turn on the television. We got television now. Turn on the television to see what happened in Little Rock.
The Army moved
Before
its
TV,
paratroopers up.
racism had been
Meanwhile,
invisible to most
paratroopers
whites.
remain on duty.
Now, as sets across the nation tuned into the Little Rock story, Americans saw their moral scars exposed by a new group of reporters.
John Chancellor of NBC News reporting from Little Rock.
I must say I was very pleased to see the 101st Airborne marching down that street. I hated the feeling that I was taking sides, but every reporter has a heart, and mine just soared. I saw not just the troopers coming down the street, I saw the Constitution of the United States coming down that street.
These new reporters are not just reporters, but on a story of this moral intensity. John Chancellor and the men like him are, in fact, modern-day prophets. And he might as well be saying, as the film is rolling, this is a sin, this is a sin, this is a sin.
The drama of Little Rock continued on throughout the year. Despite military guards in the hallways, the 9 children endured insults, cruel pranks, and assaults. But by June, one senior, Ernest Green, did receive his diploma in a ceremony attended by Martin Luther King.
No less a mild, entertaining figure as Louis Armstrong, the great trumpet player, made the statement, if the United States can't take care of those little children, to hell with the United States. Shocked, Louis Armstrong said that. Nice, mild Louis.
Nobody knows the trouble I've seen.
He had been hiding himself. He had been invisible. His real self had been invisible. And suddenly he becomes visible as the real Louis Armstrong. Not only could play trumpet, but he could be a man.
Reality.